Welcome to my next Lost. Season 3 episode review video. Before I get into that, though, pretty important. If you aren't caught up to the point where I am at rewatching or watching Lost, or you're just not entirely sure, then you definitely need to take the initiative and pay attention to the episode's title, which of course I'll mention, as well as put in the description. If that happens to be the case, if you're not caught up, it would be my recommendation that you don't watch this detailed review any further to avoid any potential spoilers. And full disclosure, I've already seen the show Lost 3 other times. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. I wanted to rewatch the show to let it resonate. However, I'm not the only one that's currently watching Lost. The legendary Crazy Coffee Man, who goes by Richard, is actually watching Lost for the first time. So, join us on the journey and let's discuss this awesome and amazing show in the comments section, but I don't want to see any spoilers past this episode. So with all that said, this will be Lost, Season 3, Episode 20. The title of this episode is called The Man Behind the Curtain, and this will be my review reaction recap after just finishing watching the episode. So we start off with a flashback. We have it taking place in a wooded area. We have a woman crying in pain. Her name is Emily, and she's screaming while she's in labor. Her husband, Roger, tries to help. She says there is something wrong, but he asks her to push. So she does, and the baby is born. Emily says that it hurts, and when Roger looks at his hands, he sees that she is hemorrhaging. He tells her that no one knows where they are, and asks if she can hold the baby while he carries her. So Roger picks Emily up and carries her and the baby away from the wooded area onto a road. There is a signpost which says they are 32 miles from Portland. Roger shouts for help as a truck and a car passes by. A red convertible then stops, and a man and a woman stop to help them. Horace, the man, acts quickly, instructing Roger to keep Emily warm and asking if the baby is okay. Roger says he doesn't know. Just before Emily asks Roger to call the baby Benjamin, Emily dies as Benjamin sleeps quietly. Back to current time on the island, Ben is in his tent, once again looking at the wooden, I should say, Annie doll that he received from his childhood friend Annie as his birthday present when he was a child. Richard Alpert enters, and in conversation, Ben learns that the tape recorder with his new instructions was never taken back to the medical station, despite it being missing. Ben slams his reading glasses down and storms out to ask Tom about it, but Tom's gaze is elsewhere. Ben looks to see John Locke enter the camp, carrying what appears to be a dead body wrapped in canvas, as on his back. The others stare in silence. Locke does not reveal that Sawyer actually killed Anthony Cooper, and Locke now demands to know everything about the island, having held his end of the deal, and tells Ben to start from the beginning. So Ben pours a drink for himself and Locke as he discusses the others in a little more detail. Ben admits that although Locke may think Ben is in charge, it is actually Jacob who is in charge of their group. Ben comments that we all answer to someone. Ben says that only he is allowed to see Jacob. Locke, of course, is skeptical, but Ben defends himself by saying that the reason Jacob only talks to Ben is that Ben is the only one remaining that was born on the island. Ben insists that Jacob only tells him what to do and only trusts him. Locke accuses Ben of being the man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz, and that Ben is a liar. Ben asks Locke what he bases that theory on, and Locke says that if Ben were telling the truth, his hand would be shaking. Ben looks down at his shaking hand. Back to our flashback, Ben and his father Roger arrive at the island by submarine and are greeted by Horace, the man who stopped his convertible to help them on the road that day when Ben was born. People all dressed in Dharma uniforms, moving boxes, and they're receiving a delivery too. Roger explains to Ben that Horace has helped him get work for the Dharma Initiative. Ben says nothing as they head past the Dharma welcomers who are giving out stuff. And then Horace takes Ben under his arm as they pass under a sign proclaiming Namaste. Inside the processing center, Roger and Ben watch a brief video on the initiative and the barracks area. As Ben waits, watching the brief video, a girl, Annie, introduces herself. She offers him an Apollo chocolate bar, saying that they can have as many as they like. Roger holds up his Dharma uniform and angrily protests that he has been given the occupation of workman. Remember in that episode where Hurley drove the van, the name was Workman on there? Yeah. And then he says that he came to the island because Dharma was doing experiments to change the world, not be a janitor. She calmly apologizes and tells him that he is free to apply for something else. Back to the island, Mikkel runs into camp shouting for Ben. Ben goes out to see him and tells Mikkel what he thought he was dead. Mikkel says he was fortunate that the pylons were not set to a lethal level. He looks up and sees John Locke. Mikkel demands to know why Locke is there. Mikkel tells Ben that Locke tried to kill him. Ben says that Locke has joined them and asks Mikkel where he's been. Mikkel tells Ben that several of Locke's people have an injured woman who parachuted onto the island. He says that her helicopter crashed into the water, that her ship is 130 kilometers to the west, and that she has a radio phone, a satellite phone. Ben is surprised and concerned by the news. Ben suggests that rather than take immediate action, that they will see in a couple of nights' time, as they will be heading to the survivors' camp to take the pregnant women away. Locke uses the opportunity to force Ben's hand, announcing in front of the entire group that Ben was going to take him to see Jacob instead. Mikkel seems offended and questions why Ben is taking Locke to see Jacob. Locke responds by stepping forward and beating Mikkel unconscious, and then when Ben signals for Tom and Richard to intervene, they do nothing. Reluctantly, Ben agrees to take Locke to see Jacob as they collect water at the river. Alex arrives and gives Locke a handgun. Ben appears slightly alarmed by this. She coldly tells Ben, "Happy birthday, Dad," as she leaves. Back to our flashback. Ben is in a class learning about volcanoes from his teacher, Olivia. She was the woman with Horace just after Ben was born. She demonstrates the effect that water has on baking powder to stimulate the effect of a volcano. As Olivia notes similarities to the island, the building shakes and a siren sounds. Olivia orders the class to get into their positions. The children huddle together in the corner of the room. Olivia grabs a bolt-action rifle and tells Annie to lock the door. As Annie locks the door, she sees armed Dharma workers moving past the window. There are sounds of explosions in the distance. Ben is still seated at his desk as Olivia yells at him to move to safety. Annie grabs Ben by the arm and leads him to the corner with the other children. Annie tells Ben that it is the hostiles and that it will be okay. Sawyer, returning from helping John Locke, hides in the trees and grabs Saeed's attention. He explains about the tape, and later the two let Kate in on the revelation. They talk about where Jack and Juliet are, and Kate admits that she told them about Naomi. Ben and Locke head off, despite Ben's misgivings about seeing Jacob without being summoned. Back to our flashback. Sometime later, after the events of the hostels, Ben is on a swing set with Annie, who gives him a birthday present. He opens the gift box to find two handmade wooden dolls, one male, one female, and he explains that the dolls would mean that they never have to be apart. She takes the doll of Ben and gives him the doll representing her. Ben comes home later in the evening to find his father asleep on the couch, surrounded by empty beer cans. Ben seems used to this routine, and he places his gift box on the table. He takes an empty beer can from his dad's hand and starts to take his father's boots off. Roger sees the gift box on the table. He apologizes for getting Ben's birthday, adding that it's hard to celebrate the anniversary of Ben killing his wife, Emily. Ben seems used to this routine too, as Roger goes on to say that Emily was only 7 months pregnant when she gave birth to Ben. Roger is unhappy she is gone, and that he is stuck on the island with Ben. The words from his father prompt Ben to run out of the house. He runs to the sonic fence, but stops just before he reaches it. He hears a brief whisper, then his mother appears on the other side of the fence. He goes to move towards her, but she shouts, "Don't!" She says it's not time yet. Ben yells to her, but she goes to the jungle. Tearfully, Ben decides to go home. After some time, back to our current time, Ben and Locke come across a line of gray ash on the ground, which crosses their path. Ben steps over and Locke investigates by touching it with his fingers. Before Locke can investigate it further, Ben insists that they keep moving and Locke follows. The whole camp is in uproar about Naomi, as well as her story about the plane having already been found. As Sawyer plays the tape, Jack and Juliet return. Everyone questions them, but Juliet tries to explain that she is actually helping them. They turn over the tape and hear that Ben plans to lead a team to kidnap all the fertile women. Juliet reveals that she has already told Jack about it, and they were still thinking of a plan. Back to our flashback. Ben has prepared an escape, and he later returns to the fence armed with the deactivation code. After entering the code, he removes a white rabbit from his bag, using it to test the fence that it is deactivated. Once the rabbit gets through without injury, Ben follows, running into the jungle. Amidst whispers. Suddenly, Richard Alpert appears, scaring Ben, but Richard is smoothing, and Ben begins to speak to him. He asks Richard if he is one of the hostiles, and Richard says that Ben, whether he even knows what that means. And then Ben says he is looking for his mother and that he has seen her even though she is dead. Richard tells Ben to go home, but Ben then asks if he can join Richard. Richard tells him that it might be possible, but Ben would have to be very, very patient. Back to our current time, Ben and Locke reach a small rundown cabin at night, and Ben tells Locke to turn off the flashlight because Jacob hates technology as much as Locke does. As Ben lights the oil lamp that is hanging outside the wooden hut, he warns that after opening the door, there is no turning back. Locke remains determined. Inside, Ben introduces John Locke to Jacob and gestures toward an empty chair. There appears to be nobody else in the room but Ben and Locke. The contents of the room are very old. There are jars on a windowsill containing red liquid. Ben proceeds to chat to Jacob, and argue, while Locke stands in complete disbelief. Locke accuses Ben of putting on a show, but Ben insists that there is someone sitting in the chair and that Locke is too limited to see him. Locke tells Ben that he is pathetic and turns to leave. As he does, he hears a deep voice saying, "Help me." Locke asks Ben to repeat himself, but Ben says he didn't say anything. Ben seems shocked that Locke had heard a voice. Locke shines his flashlight onto Ben's face, and he does so the room starts to shake. Ropes and chains shake on the wall, chairs rock and windows smash. Ben's lantern falls to the floor and catches fire. The fire is quickly extinguished as if by magic. Ben also appears to shake someone in the chair, telling him to stop and that he has had his fun, immediately after which he is thrown hard against a wall by an unseen force. Locke sees a man sitting in the chair for a brief moment. He stumbles outside in fear and confusion. The chaos stops as quickly as it began. Ben, face ash, follows him and hangs up the oil lamp outside the house. Locke asks what on earth was in there. Ben simply replies that it is Jacob. Ben and Locke walk through the jungle. Ben asks Locke what Jacob said. Locke responds by telling Ben that there is no Jacob, that everything that happened at the cabin was a trick, and that he is going to expose Ben as a fraud. Locke also notices that Ben is leading them back to a different path. Ben tells Locke that there is something he wants Locke to see first. Locke says he has seen enough, but they keep moving. On the way, Ben admits that some of the things that he has said on the island were not true. He admits to not having been born on the island, like he said. And then back to a flashback. Ben, now in his 20s, is dressed in the Dharma uniform, which shows he is now a workman like his father. He is loving he's looking at the Annie doll, which Annie gave him when they were children, like we saw. And then Ben places the doll inside the bag, which he always carries around with him. He goes out of the house and helps his father load a blue Dharma van with beer bound for the Pearl Station, and then confronts his father about forgetting his birthday. Roger seems embarrassed and sheepishly suggests that they go for a drive together after their work is done to have some father-son time. Ben says he'd like that. And then Roger drives Ben in his van to a hill and parks there. Roger comments on the beautiful view as he swigs beer from a can. Ben asks Roger whether he truly does think that it was Ben's fault that Emily died. And Roger's answer is, "What do I know?" Ben glances at his watch, which shows the time as exactly 4 o'clock and 15, then 16 seconds. Some numbers. And then Roger notices Ben looking at his watch and jokingly asks Ben if he has a date. Seeing that Ben didn't find the comment amusing, Roger says that he will do his best to remember Ben's birthday next year, but Ben responds by saying he doesn't think that will happen. He tells his father that he has missed Emily too, but the difference for Ben is that he had to put up with his father for all those years. Ben tells Roger it took a lot of patience before calmly saying goodbye and putting on a gas mask. He takes out a gas canister and pulls the pin. Roger chokes and bleeds from the nose and mouth. Ben remains in the vehicle and stares ahead as Roger, his father, dies. Ben returns to the barracks where the Dharma workers lie dead on the lawn. They have been gassed. Ben slowly moves around the area and he sees Horace dead on a park bench. Ben reaches out and closes Horace's eyes. Richard Alpert and his group emerge wearing gas masks. Richard looks at his watch and then takes his gas mask off. Richard asks Ben if they should collect Roger's body, but Ben tells Richard to leave Roger there. The group begins to collect the dead bodies. They finally, back to our current time, they finally reach what Ben wanted to show Locke. Locke gazes down into unfilled mass grave full of skeletons. Dharma jumpsuits still visible on some. Ben explains that the skeletons are the remains of his people, the Dharma Initiative. Ben says that they came here seeking harmony. However, they could not even coexist with the original inhabitants of the island. He explains that when it became clear to Ben that one side had to go, he did what he had to do. He says he was smart enough not to end up in a ditch like the Dharma Initiative. Ben states that this also makes him smarter than Locke as Locke spins around and pulls his knife. Ben shoots him in the left abdomen in the kidney area. Locke falls backwards into the pit of the Dharma corpses. Ben calmly asks what Jacob had to say to John as he lies amongst the corpses. John asks Ben why he did this. Ben says he did it because John heard him. John manages to say, "Help me," but Ben doesn't realize that John is repeating Jacob's words. Ben points the gun at an already injured John Locke, a severely injured Locke, and demands to know what Jacob said to him. John raises his hand and says, "He said, 'Help me.'" Ben, visibly shaken by the words, replies to Locke that he had better hope that Jacob will help him now. Ben leaves and Locke is left gasping for breath, and that's what ends this episode of Lost. So pretty good episode. 8.5 out of 10. Obviously, the character of this episode is going to be Ben, and the secondary character is going to be John Locke. So you've heard everything that I have to say. Now it's your turn. If you're a fan of Lost and you want to help me out with the YouTube algorithm, please don't forget to Hulk smash the like button, share the video with a friend, put this video on any one of your social media platforms. Don't forget to sound off in the comment section about what your thoughts are pertaining to this episode of Lost. What would you rate it? What would be your scare of the episode? Well, that's the same thing. Who would be your character of the episode and secondary character? Remember, you'll be interacting with me and the legendary Crazy Coffman who goes by Richard. And then last but certainly not least, don't forget to hit that sub button. You're watching the video anyway. Subscribe to the channel, join the team, show your damn support, and be a part of something special. And you never know, we're going to see on JDev TV.